On today's show, the Cavs get back in the win column in the exact way that they needed to with a great defensive performance against the Detroit Pistons on Monday night. We'll talk about this one and what's next for the Cavs on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Cade Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, need to let you know about the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter. It is your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. The Cleveland Cavaliers' 3-game losing streak is no more as they beat the Detroit Pistons 110-91 on Monday night at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. And this is a game that we haven't seen a ton of from the Cavs this year. We've obviously seen them win quite a few games. They're 37-9 on the season, so they've won plenty of games this season, but we haven't seen them win very many games where offensively they just don't have it. I didn't think that things were poor offensively for them. I just thought it was sort of a night that they missed shots, and I'll talk about that coming up a little bit later on in the show. But they won this game because they were so good defensively. This was one of the best defensive performances that the Cavs have had all year. The 91 points scored by the Detroit Pistons represents the lowest number of points that Detroit has had in any game this season. It is the second fewest point total by an opponent against the Cavs this season, dating back to I believe it was December 3rd game against the Washington Wizards, where they held the Wizards to 87 points. And make no mistake, like, Detroit is not some offensive juggernaut, but they're also a team that has been playing really well. I don't think that this is the most impressive win the Cavs have had. I don't think that this is a win I'm going to overreact to, but I do think that this win was definitely a step in the right direction, because what have we talked about lately? We've talked about how this team has had too much slippage on the defensive end, and they went into Monday night against the Pistons with the 28th defensive rating in the entire NBA in the month of January. They've been bad. They were really, really good on that end of the floor on Monday night, and I think that is the team they need to be. I'm not saying they have to do this every single night. Like, holding a team to 91 points routinely in an NBA game is not going to happen in the year 2025. Like, that's just not where the league is at right now. The Cavs could have this same defensive effort, the same defensive performance on other nights, and a team might score 105 or a team might score 110. Like, that's just where the league is. So I don't necessarily look at that, but I do look at, okay, well, what did the Cavs do really well? Because you look at this Detroit team, and they're a team that right now I look at as they have one really, really good creator in Cade Cunningham. And Cade is somebody that I believe, when the All-Star reserves are named on Thursday, I believe he's going to be on that list. I believe he's going to be on a lot of All-Star teams for years to come. I think he's an incredible player, and I think that the Cavs really did an awesome job defending him. And the player I came away so impressed with from Monday night was Max Strus, because Max was the guy that was his assignment. Cade Cunningham was the challenge that Max had defensively throughout the night whenever the two of them shared the floor. And I thought he did a fantastic job. Limited. And of course, Cade's going to be able to go out there and get counting stats because, again, he's a really good player. He scored 22 points, but he needed 26 shots to get there. He was not very efficient on this night. He had 7 assists, had a couple turnovers. And the other thing that I do think Max did really well to help this game out was rebound, because that is a big area where the Cavs have struggled lately. Like, think back to the games against Houston where they gave up, in the first game, they gave up 20 offensive rebounds. The game against Philadelphia, they gave up 16 offensive rebounds. They were able to win the rebounding battle, which is something that is important for this team. Jarrett Allen stepped up there. Evan Mobley stepped up there. Max Strus had 8 rebounds. Like, that was a total team effort on the glass. I thought it was a total team effort defensively. I thought Evan Mobley was really good. I thought Jarrett Allen was really good, because the Pistons, in addition to having, Cade Cunningham, who, like I said, is really good, they've got some size. Like, Jalen Duren, I think, is a good player. Isaiah Stewart, I think, is a good player down low. And I thought that the Cavs did a relatively good job on those guys too. And I think that they deserve a lot of credit for the way they played defensively, because this is a team that hasn't played like this. Yes, last Monday, they had a great defensive game against the Phoenix Suns. I was probably a little bit more impressed considering the offense they went against. Like at the time, Phoenix, I believe, entered that matchup as the number 9 offense in basketball, where the Pistons, I think, were 17th or somewhere along there. Like they're not a great offense. But considering what the last week has been, where they were okay defensively last Wednesday against Houston, and then they were bad defensively against Philadelphia on Friday, and then they were worse defensively on Saturday against Houston at home. This was a team that really, I do think, needed to bounce back and show something on that end of the floor, because ultimately, if they're going to get to where they want to go, they're going to need to win games in multiple ways, right? Like they can't just only be an offense first team every single night. They need to be a team that can win because they can lock down teams. And again, this is not something that you should expect every single night. Like when they go to Miami on Wednesday, I would be surprised if they hold the Heat to 91 points the way they held the Pistons. I would be impressed, but I would be surprised if that happens. I do look at too, the Pistons shot their second lowest field goal percentage for a game in this game on Monday night. They shot 38.9% against the Cavs. That is the second worst. They had 2 other games where they shot 38.5 in both of those games. So I guess technically this is third worst, but whatever. Like it was really good all around. I do think that if you want to be nitpicky about what they did defensively, they only forced 10 turnovers, and Detroit has been a team that has been pretty prone to turnovers. I was a little surprised that the Cavs didn't really blitz Cade Cunningham. Now, they didn't need to because what they were doing worked. I did think that if push came to shove, okay, maybe that's a strategy you see where they're going to try and just get the ball out of his hands, but they did such a good job. And this is, again, where Max Strus deserves a ton of credit. They did such a good job defending him, and Max made life really challenging on Cade. He picked him up not every possession, but a lot of possessions. He picked him up full court and made him work just to get the ball across half court and made life difficult. I would like to see this type of performance from this team more often. Again, I don't think it's going to be something that happens every night, but if this is a team that can start to string together these type of defensive performances, then I think you start feeling better about what the playoffs look like, what their championship aspirations really look like, because they talk about being a team that defense matters to them, and defense has mattered to them for the past several years. They've been a much better defensive team in years past than they have been this year. Now, of course, this year they have transformed into an absolutely elite offensive team, but the defensive side has, I think, suffered a little bit because of that. And for them to be able to get to where they want to go, I don't think that they need to be number 1 in the league defensively. Like that ship has sailed. They could play the best defense in the history of the franchise, and they're not going to catch OKC with what the Thunder have done on defense so far this year. But I also don't know that they can be 12th, which that's what they came into Monday night as, the 12th ranked defense. And a lot of that's being held up by what they were able to do during the month of November or the month of December when they were 3rd. So it was good to see them get back to that style of play. And the one thing that Kenny Atkinson had been talking about lately is that the paint was a little too accessible to opposing perimeter players. And I do think a big part of that is the fact that Dean Wade is out, and I will talk about his injury coming up in the last segment today, that Caris LeVert is not playing, that Isaac Okoro is not playing. I think the defense was obviously impacted by the fact that Evan Mobley was not playing previously. And then even on Saturday night in his first game back from that calf injury against the Rockets, I didn't think that he looked like Evan Mobley. He looked like someone who's trying to find a rhythm, who's trying to kind of dip his toe back in the water. And those calf injuries are tricky, but I do think that the healthier he gets and, the rhythm that he can find, the better off he's going to be on both ends of the floor, because he looks like a good player right now. He doesn't look like a great player, and that's fine. He doesn't need to look like a great player in his second game back from a week and a half calf injury, and he doesn't need to look like a great player at the end of January. He needs to be a great player in April, May, and June. But defensively, I think all of those things really stood out to me, that they were able to keep the Pistons out of the paint quite as much. Their rim protection was better. I think that part of the reason why the defense has slipped so much is the Cavs perimeter players have made life really difficult for Jared Allen. They've made life really difficult for Evan Mobley. And not to say that those guys have played their best basketball lately either, because I don't think that would be true. But I do think that the perimeter defenders for the Cavs have made life really tough on them. And I think on Monday night, it wasn't like that. I think the Cavs perimeter defenders did a great job. They did a great job contesting a lot of Cade Cunningham's 2-point attempts, because he's somebody that does like to take a few more mid-range shots than maybe we're used to seeing in today's day and age, because that's how the NBA works now. But I thought overall, this was a great defensive performance. Now, the thing is going to be, well, can they continue to stack again? Maybe not holding Miami on Wednesday to 91 points. That's a bit of a tough ask, but can they continue to stack good defensive games together? They're going to have another stretch this season, I would bet, where they're not great, but can they turn this around? Can they prove that, hey, we're a great offensive team? There are no questions about that. I don't think that needs to be proven anymore, but can they prove that we can find a way to be a great defensive team too? Because they've not done that consistently enough, but I do think that Monday night was a really good start for them. I also think it was important not only that the Cavs won, but the fact they won with defense was something that was important. I'll tell you exactly why next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Rocket RX. If you're ready to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, Rocket RX has the solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor visits or pharmacy trips. Everything delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. With Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team. Complete a quick 100% online consultation, and you could get your free prescription today. Visit rocketrx.com to get started now. It only takes 2 minutes. And right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Again, rocketrx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions do apply. Rocket RX, better sex made simple. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. The Cavs needed a win, first and foremost. A 3-game losing streak for any team is not a fun thing to deal with. I can't imagine the Cavs were having fun with the way they were playing basketball over the past week, but they needed a win with defense. And I thought it was fitting that during this losing streak, for the most part, they had actually been really good offensively, right? Like they score 131 points on Saturday against Houston. They score 129 points on Friday night in Philadelphia against the Sixers. I didn't think the offense was great last Wednesday in Houston, but I didn't think it was terrible either. I thought they did some uncharacteristic things, but you look at that and you could point to, well, they weren't losing those games because of offense. They were losing those games very clearly because of defense. And for the most part, the games they've lost in the month of January have been because of defense. They have not won very many games this month because they defended well. Like you can say that about the Phoenix game last Monday, and you can say that about Monday night's game against Detroit. You can say that about those two games, but other than that, it's really hard to say that. And the fact that they got back to being able to win with defense is something to me that I look at as really important, because when the playoffs arrive, the Cavs should win quite a few playoff games. They're not a team that should lose in the first round. I don't think they're a team that should lose in the second round, depending on how the matchups shake out. They are a team that should find themselves in the conference finals. And that means they're going to win at least 8 postseason games. Well, of those 8 games, and I think it'll be more than that. That would be if they get swept in the conference finals, which no matter who they play, I would be surprised with that. But let's break this down. Of those playoff games that we expect them to win, they're going to win some of them because they're just so good offensively. But they're not going to be elite every single night in the playoffs. The playoffs don't work like that. You have to be able to be a championship caliber team, you have to be able to win games in different ways. You have to be able to win games with your offense. And we know the Cavs are capable of that. I have no questions about that. And I don't think you should either, with how well they've played on that end of the floor. You have to be capable of winning games when things slow down. again, that's kind of half-court offense, half-court defense. You have to be able to win games maybe more early in the playoffs. You have to be able to win games playing at pace. And I do think the Cavs have done a good job this year mixing up their paces and knowing when to play fast, knowing when to play slow. I think that for the most part, not every time, but for the most part, the clutch stuff has looked good, which I do think is a good indicator of things to come in the postseason. But then you look at, okay, well, what if the offense doesn't have it going on? Because against Detroit, it didn't have it going on against the Pistons. They were not great offensively. This is not a game that we're going to look at and say, wow, the Cavs really lit up the scoreboard. I mean, 110 points is fine. Their offensive rating in this game was around 114, which is league average, right? Like, it's funny that I'm sitting here talking about this being a bad offensive night when in essence it was an NBA average offensive night for the Cavs. But they were 44% from the floor, which is not great, not what we're used to seeing. And they were 27.3% from beyond the arc. They were 12 of 44 from deep. They didn't get good nights from really anybody. Darius Garland was 3 of 11. Donovan Mitchell was 2 of 6, which is fine. Max Strus was 2 of 7. Sam Merrill was 2 of 5. Like, he might have had the best night shooting from beyond the arc, which is not something that we've been able to say much of. He also took a nasty elbow to the face in the fourth quarter too, and then hit a 3 after that. So that was good to see. But this was not anything near the best offensive performance that the Cavs have had. What they did do well was get to the free throw line. Like, they had 23 attempts from the charity stripe, and it was a good thing they kept Detroit off the free throw line. Pistons only taking 11 free throws, but they didn't win this game because of offense. They won this game because of defense. And this is a team that has talked about, and even on Monday night, they talk about wanting defense to be their identity. And the question that pops into my mind is, well, how can this be a team that puts defense first or has a defensive identity if they're so good offensively? Because all year long, like, again, tonight was a bad night for them. I didn't think they got bad shots. Like, I thought they took some pretty good threes that just didn't go down. And sometimes that's life in the NBA. You're not going to shoot the lights out every single night. The Cavs have done so more often than not, but you're not going to do that every single night. And on nights you don't do that, how do you respond? And I think that knowing what the emphasis on this game was before the game, knowing what the conversation had been for the last few days, knowing how the last couple of games went with how many points the Cavs gave up, I think if the Cavs would have had their normal offensive night, they still would have played really well defensively. Like, I just don't think that, one, it mattered who the opponent was, or two, it mattered what they did offensively. I think that this was going to be a night where they wanted to come out and make defense a point of emphasis, prove something, if you will, on that defensive end of the floor, because that is sort of the opposite of what they've done. But I thought it was fitting that on the night that they played so well defensively, it was a night they kind of needed to, because it wasn't a night that they got bailed out because Donovan Mitchell had a hot night or Darius Garland went off from 3, or maybe even Evan Mobley had 25 points. Like, that did not happen. And the fact that they were able to lock down, the fact they were able to stay focused, and truly, you know, at times I think we have seen this at the worst versions of this team. I think we have seen when things go poorly, and this is not a Cavs specific thing, this happens to every team, but there are times when things go poorly on one end of the floor, teams allow it to affect what they do on the other end of the floor, right? Like, you see a team starting to miss shots offensively, and then defensively, instead of raising up a level, the frustration from what's going on the offensive end of the floor can bleed over to the defensive end of the floor. And that's when, you know, truthfully, that is when we see avalanches happen. When the Cavs are able to force stops and force teams to be frustrated offensively, it bleeds into what's going on defensively. They lose focus. They're thinking about what went wrong offensively. And the Cavs have been really, really good at taking advantage of teams in those moments. The Cavs at times have fell victim to that. Every NBA team does. But on a night where their offense wasn't clicking, they didn't let that affect their defense, I think is a good sign. And I think that, again, no matter what they did offensively, I thought they were going to come out on Monday night in this game and really turn things up defensively, because I do think they hear the noise. I don't think that they believe they've played well on defense during this month. I think they know where they rank in the NBA, and I think they know it's not good enough. I think that coaching staff has let them know that the defensive effort, the defensive performance during this month has not been good enough. There are some legitimate reasons as to why. There are other reasons that I don't think are necessarily legitimate. But there are some reasons, primarily some of the guys that are injured right now, that it's a big deal they're injured. And those guys, Dean Wade, Caris LeVert, Isaac Okoro, like that matters to what they're doing defensively. Obviously, Evan Mobley not being at full strength right now and missing the time that he did, like all of that stuff matters. But I also don't think the attention to detail, the level of focus, all those things were good enough. On Monday night, it was. And that's why they won this game. And I do think it meant something to this team to be able to win a game in which offense wasn't the driver of success. A lot of nights, the offense is going to be the driver of success because this team is really, really good at putting the ball in the basket. But to get to where they want to go, they need to have more nights like this one on the defensive end of the floor. Again, not holding teams to 91 points, but they need to do a better job of just defending and competing and making life difficult for opponents on that end, because when they do, as we've seen, this is a championship level team. We saw a championship level defense on Monday night. The offense will be fine. I would have no worry about having an off night offensively against Detroit. But if this defense can stick around, I think you're going to feel a lot better about the Cavs. We did get an injury update about Dean Wade, so we'll talk about that. Spend a little bit of time talking about Evan Mobley and Caris LeVert too next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Rocket Money. So maybe you've got some subscriptions that you've forgotten about, or maybe you didn't know this and maybe this is kind of embarrassing, but maybe you're paying for something twice and you're only actually getting that service or subscription once, but you're being charged for it twice and you're not aware of it. Well, that's where Rocket Money comes in, because Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together all in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, even the goals financially that you want to hit this year, right? We all want to grow that savings account. Who doesn't want to do that? Rocket Money can help you do that because they have over 5 million users that have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. That's a lot of money to be saved a year. You don't know how much money you could be saving if maybe you were on Rocket Money and maybe you were just a little bit wiser with that cash. Rocket Money can help you do that. And what you want to do is you want to cancel those unwanted subscriptions and you want to reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. So go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's Rocketmoney, ROCKETMONEY.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON. Again, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. If you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content before the game. And I asked Cavs head coach Kenny Atkinson about, or somebody asked, it might not have been me, on Saturday about Dean Wade and where he was at and the injury. I actually think it was Ethan Sansa asked it on Saturday. But Kenny Atkinson was asked about it. And basically, he did not have an update. It was a thing where, they played Friday night. That's when Dean got hurt against Philadelphia. And he had not yet really been examined by the team's medical personnel. And he said that was going to happen on Saturday night. So Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com asked to follow up to that, of course, on Monday. And Kenny Atkinson basically said, he doesn't have a firm timeline on Dean Wade, but he did say that this is not something that is day to day. I do believe that this is something that is fairly significant with Dean, and I would not expect to see him on the floor in the near future for the Cavs. I don't know when he'll be back, but it's not as if he's going to be back later this week or even next week. Like, this is something that I do think is going to keep him out for a little while. So that then becomes, well, we've just spent the first 25 minutes of the show talking about the Cavs defense, and Dean Wade is obviously a really big part in that because he is somebody that, if he would have been healthy on Monday night, he would have been the one defending Cade Cunningham instead of Max Strus. And he is somebody that I've talked about as being indispensable for this team because they don't really have a backup Dean Wade. Not because Dean Wade is the best player, not because Dean Wade does all of these things no one else is capable of. It's because they don't have somebody else. They don't have somebody else with Dean Wade's skill set that is also Dean Wade's size. Like, Dean's a good shooter. This team has a lot of good shooting. The shooting stuff is very, very real with this team. Dean's a good defender. They have a lot of good defenders. You've got Evan Mobley. You've got Jared Allen. You've got Max Strus, who did great on Monday night. Caris, LeVert, Isaac Okoro. I could go on. But those guys are not the size of Dean. Those guys don't have the athletic traits that Dean does. And that is what makes this complicated, because this is a team that I don't want to say like can't, make a deep postseason run without Dean, but I think it's much easier if Dean Wade's on the floor and playing and contributing and healthy and doing all the things that you would expect out of Dean Wade when he's healthy. So I do think that this is a big blow for the Cavs. And, they got Evan Mobley back on Saturday. I don't think that Evan necessarily looked like Evan still, and I think that's fine. It's going to take some time. I think calf injuries, as I mentioned, are very tricky. They're very finicky, and I think Evan will be fine. I thought he was good on Monday night. I thought he was, the best thing he did for the Cavs was rebounding. He had 14 rebounds. That was something that they really did struggle with while he was out. I think his shot looks a little flat. It looks a little short right now. Even watching him during shoot around on Monday morning, he was leaving some shots short. And I think that's something that's to be expected when you're dealing with working your way back from a lower body injury. So I would have no concerns about Evan and where he's at and what he looks like right now. He'll be fine. It's just kind of working himself back in and finding a rhythm. Like, it is difficult too when you miss a week and a half to just jump right back in and find your flow immediately. So give him time. He'll be fine. And then the other injury update from Monday night, Caris LeVert missed this game with a wrist injury. Kenny did say that this is more of a day-to-day thing, that it's a sore wrist, but kind of like Isaac Okoro's shoulder, the fact that it is on I believe it's on his shooting side, and that could be something that is concerning because you don't know how long this is going to linger. And when he is back on the floor, what's it going to look like? What's his shot going to look like? Because he's been super effective for this team offensively. He has shot the basketball really, really well. What is that going to look like if he's dealing with the sore wrist? So we don't know. We don't have the answers to those questions, but when he does get back, that is going to be something to really monitor and keep in mind. I do want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today. Make it your first listen every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed. Friends don't let friends not be subscribed to Locked On Cavs. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I will be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.